The Mercedes-AMG GT is a deeply desirable everyday supercar that builds purposefully on the heritage of its SLS predecessor. It's uncompromising, intoxicating, and very, very fast.
The first Mercedes was a racing car. Ever since, the brand has had competition in its bloodline, drawn upon throughout a rich history of motorsport-orientated coupes and roadsters. Cars like this one, the Mercedes-AMG GT. Mercedes-AMG is a brand that enthusiasts may now be used to, its primary focus being the creation of high-performance versions of usually mundane Mercedes models. Every so often, though, this Affalterbach division gets let off the leash to do its own thing, and on the first occasion that happened, we got something very special. The SLS of 2009. This tribute to the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing model of the 50s proved to be a landmark car for the brand. One that proved the three-pointed star capable of mixing it with the might of Ferrari near the summit of the supercar spectrum. It's one thing, though, to prove such a point in building a low-volume, exorbitantly priced supercar. Quite another to replicate that level of excellence at lower prices and with much greater production volume. That is the fresh challenge Mercedes set itself when it launched this GT model in 2015. Now, the brand insists that this car isn't a direct SLS replacement, but it still sits on a modified version of that car's floor plan, is still primarily fashioned around similar aluminium space frame underpinnings, and still uses much the same AMG SpeedShift DCT 7-speed paddle shift transmission. It's still hand-built on the same bespoke Sindelfingen production line too. All of these things have been brought within the reach of buyers in a much more competitive part of the supercar segment. Where the SLS battled against Ferraris and Lamborghinis, this car, being up to 40% more affordable than that one was, has had its focus shifted to arguably much tougher rivals, cars like Audi's R8 and various Porsche 911s. But it's been equipped for the task. As with the SLS, you still get a V8 beneath the bonnet, but this 4-litre engine is smaller and quicker responding, with lighter weight and twin turbos comfortably compensating for the power deficit over that old car's 6.2-litre normally aspirated unit. The experience here, though, isn't just about power. Mercedes set out with this GT to create the most involving driving machine ever to sit in its regular model lineup. Quite a claim. Quite a car? Let's find out. So, what is it like? Press the large starter button on the AMG drive unit console, and the V8 that sits beneath that vast bonnet up front bellows into life with slightly disconcerting aggression. From the outset, then, you know there'll be no half measures. Sporting subtlety was never an AMG hallmark, and it has been completely dispensed with here. Apart from Porsche, no brand in this segment offers the option of manual transmission, so even hardcore enthusiasts are unlikely to be disappointed to find that you can't have that here. The frantic potential of this GT is instead harnessed by much the same AMG SpeedShift DCT 7-speed auto box that was used in this model's SLS predecessor, and which also featured in Ferrari's 458 Italia. The SpeedShift setup delivers the usual seamless shifting that characterises all dual-clutch boxes of this type, or there's the option of pressing this button that takes you into full manual mode and transfers control to these perfectly sighted steering wheel paddle shifters. Transmission toys include a race start launch control feature and software that blips the throttle on downshifts to the evocative accompaniment of popping and banging from the switchable AMG performance exhaust system. The exhaust note is one of the parameters influenced by the various settings of the AMG Dynamic Select driving mode system. This being one of those setups that can alter throttle response, steering feel, gear shift timings, and stability control thresholds to suit the way that you want to drive. Twist the AMG drive unit console controller and you'll find yourself able to choose between comfort, sport and sport plus settings. Sport plus being the one that really changes the character of the car and gets the juices flowing. Rather than always defaulting to one of AMG's preset modes though, it's much more fun to use the Adapt Individual option that allows you to set up the specific dynamic elements to your taste, much as a race driver would tune his race car. All of this is very nice to have, but as usual with any AMG model, it's the engine that defines the car. Here at least is a fundamental departure from the SLS. You've still got a V8, but in this case, the old 6.2 litre normally aspirated unit has given way to a far more modern 4 litre power plant that uses twin turbos, but goes to great lengths to conceal the fact. In a Porsche 911 turbo or a Nissan GT-R, the rush of boost you get as the turbo spools up and hurls you towards the horizon is an integral part of the whole roller coaster experience. In this case, things are very different. The engine intentionally mapped to deliver its terrifying torque in a more gradual, linear way. That doesn't mean that the feeling you get is any less exciting though. Quite the opposite, in fact. This car feels savagely fast, even if you opt for a standard GT variant that attempts to match a Porsche 911 Carrera S in price and power by offering the V8 and a lower 476 bhp state of tune. Most buyers ignore that version though and opt to move up to the 510 bhp GTS model we're trying here. The substantial premium necessary to do this ups torque from 600 to 650 Newton meters, but that won't be enough to see you going very much faster in a straight line. In the S, the 62 miles an hour from rest sprint time improves from 4 seconds to 3.8 seconds, and the top speed rises from 189 to 193 miles an hour. There are more important compensations with GTS ownership though, and we think you'll need them if you're going to be driving this car hard and you want to tame it. The first S model enhancement is one that's optional on the base GT variant, and it's a feature that we think every AMG GT owner will want. The AMG Ride Control 3-stage adaptive damping sport suspension system. This works through the various modes of the AMG Dynamic Select driving mode setup we mentioned earlier, and without the adaptability that comes with this package, driving this car hard over anything but very smooth surfaces can end up becoming something of a white knuckle ride. For quick, stable cornering on those kinds of surfaces, a car this powerful also needs the stability of a rear axle differential lock. It's a feature that all AMG GT variants include, but with this GTS variant, you get the diff activating electronically, which delivers faster, more sensitive control and allows you to push the handling limits just that little bit further. On a track, you can really feel the system playing with the power to maximize traction, and it's a very important aid to have, given the ease with which unbridled ambition might easily lead to a situation in which you could seriously frighten yourself in this car, especially if the conditions are damp. The two final GTS model dynamic enhancements include an extra, more focused, circuit-orientated race setting in that AMG Dynamic Select driving mode system, and a more powerful AMG composite braking package, which will stand up to a bit more punishment on the track. Although, if you really want peace of mind here, then you'll need to pay the absolutely enormous premium that Mercedes asks for its high-tech ceramic braking setup. If you are of a mind to equip this car with everything needful for the ultimate lap time, then you'll also want to consider another option, the AMG Dynamic Plus package that gives you dynamic engine and transmission mounts that are able to adjust their stiffness instantly and continuously to suit cornering and throttle usage. We like the concept of this package, but the fact that as part of it, you get a further stiffening of a suspension setup that many feel is already rather over firm will make this option of limited appeal to the majority of buyers. That rather uncompromising ride quality is one thing you'll have to adjust to with this Mercedes. Another issue for some might be the steering, which feels a little vague and lifeless at lower speeds, but which then redeems itself as you get faster. No, the hydraulic helm still doesn't communicate in the way that the electric steering setup in a rival Porsche 911 does, but enough feedback is provided here to allow you to feel fully in control when you're testing out this car's prodigious limits of traction and grip at speed through tighter bends. Through these turns, body roll is negligible and understeer virtually non-existent, well, unless you really barreled into the corner too quickly. The near perfect so-called front mid-engine weight balance helps enormously here too. What else might you need to know? Well, maybe the fact that you'll be able to enjoy this engine's oral fireworks all the more if you've opted for the open-topped roadster body style. It's a power plant, by the way, that also comes in two more frantic states of tune: 557 bhp in the GTC variant and 585 bhp in the extremely rare Nürburgring-tuned GTR Coupe flagship model. In whichever guise you choose, though, this dry sump V8's always throbbing, always urgent and angry, which you might occasionally find a little tiresome at the end of a long and taxing day that, well, enabled you to afford this car in the first place. Most of the time, though, you'll love the way that the lavishly intoxicating soundtrack makes even a trip into town an event worth savouring, which is just as well as, in other respects, city journeys in this car can be slightly challenging. Manoeuvring at low speeds, you really feel the bodywork's enormous width, which makes Mercedes' decision not to equip this model with standard parking sensors all the more bewildering. Still, it's all part of the way this GT never ever lets you forget the kind of car you've ignored convention and gone out and bought, which perhaps is exactly as it ought to be. Any supercar must be an eye-catching thing. The old SLS certainly was. Unlike that car, this GT model makes quite an impression at first glance. Yes, a little disappointingly, it lacks the exotic Gullwing doors that characterised its classic predecessor, but that's intentional, all part of drive not only to reduce weight, complexity and cost, but also to give this machine its own distinct character. It's also shorter and narrower than the previous Mercedes-AMG design, with aesthetic aggression that's ramped up several more degrees. Get one of these in your mirrors and you would move over quickly. Is it beautiful in the way that, say, a Porsche 911 can be? Well, possibly not. Is it dramatic, confident, and in every way a classic-looking GT sports car? Absolutely. There's this quite enormous power-domed vented bonnet that pushes the cabin right back rearwards in a manner that characterised classic 50s Mercs like the legendary 300 SL Gullwing. And if you lift it, you'll find that the 4-litre bi-turbo V8 is situated way behind the front axle line to create what Mercedes likes to call this car's front mid-engine balance. As with all AMG models, the engine bears witness to this tuning division's unique one-man, one-engine approach, the power plant embellished with a plaque featuring the signature of the engineer who worked on it. My compliments, Herr Maud. I mentioned overtaking aggression. Now it's emphasised by this huge three-dimensional diamond radiator grille with its prominent Mercedes star, its broad central louvre and AMG lettering. LED high-performance headlamps flank this opening, their focus menacingly emphasised by eyebrow-style daytime running lights. Beneath these, large air intakes optimise the flow of air to that throbbing race-bred V8 engine, and more cooling is delivered by a further lower opening that's framed by a front splitter finished either in body colour, satin chrome or, as in this case, high gloss black, depending on the model and spec you've chosen. In profile, you better appreciate more gorgeous detailing across the powerfully sculpted surfaces. Things like the dome-shaped arched roof line, the frameless doors, and perhaps most notably, these twin-finned side air outlets, a classic Mercedes sporting cue. The only key character line is this lower one that flows upwards between huge wheels of at least 19 inches in size. At the rear, this more potent GTS model wears even bigger 20-inch rims. Here, as you can see, we've opted for the coupe variant. The alternative roadster version's fabric roof gives the profile a subtly different line when it's raised, but it's still handsome, and it can be lowered in just 11 seconds to fold neatly away beneath the rear deck. The rear is less overt, all smooth surfaces, broad shoulders and narrow tail lamp graphics with jewel-like illumination courtesy of 18 individual LEDs. What you can't see at standstill is the extendable rear aerofoil you get in mainstream models, which adds to the downforce created by this potent-looking lower black diffuser with its integrated tailpipes. As usual, though, what's more important is what lies out of sight, a modified version of the chassis and aluminium spout base frame used in the previous SLS model. Most of what's important in the structure of this car is fashioned from that light, strong material, although steel is used in the boot lid, while the front deck is made from magnesium. Take a seat behind the wheel and the SLS underpinnings are betrayed by the way the designers have had to retain that car's huge, oversized central transmission tunnel, which comes from a choice of chromed, high gloss or, as in this case, carbon finishes. In a nod to that V8 engine up front, it features 8 AMG drive unit control buttons laid out in a V formation. The most important of these is the red illuminated start-stop button that's thoughtfully been relocated so as to be close at hand for owners of right-hand drive models. All of this would be fine if A, the 4 buttons nearest to you weren't in precisely the kind of position you'd otherwise want for resting your left arm, and B, a different set of priorities have been chosen for the primary cabin features that sit between the buttons in the middle of the drive unit console. The second issue is the more significant one. The twin cup holders you'll rarely need get prime forward positioning. In contrast, the auto gear selector you'll use frequently has been pushed so far back behind your elbow that you have to reach awkwardly rearwards to operate it. In between, this futuristic looking twin plane protuberance is there to manage all your infotainment needs, with a rotary dial that swivels, slides and pushes below a higher surface touchpad that permits letters, numbers and special characters to be handwritten, although in this right-hand drive model there's the awkwardness of having to do that with your left hand. Otherwise, there isn't much to complain about in this exquisitely finished cabin, unless you were expecting the kind of useful, occasional, rear, child-orientated seats you get in a Porsche 911 or a BMW Y8, in which case you're going to be disappointed. Indeed, even with only 2 of you inside, it is easy to feel fairly shrink-wrapped in here. Potential buyers previously used to an SLS will really notice this model's 50mm reduction in wheelbase length, which isn't to say that it's in any way uncomfortable. No, on the contrary, the Napa leather-trimmed AMG sport seats position you perfectly in a low, purposeful stance in front of a flat-bottomed AMG performance steering wheel that can deliver a DTM-style feel if, as here, you get it fully trimmed in Dynamica microfiber. So, gear lever situation apart, there's very little wrong with the ergonomics. Well, almost nothing. Anyway, someone needs to explain to us why it was necessary to mount the hazard warning switch in the roof. Forget about that though, just admire the sheer style of it all. It's deliciously unnecessary to have as many as 4 jet engine style chrome vents here at the top of the centre stack, but it looks great and it adds to the whole aviation style theme. Just above these sits the 8.4-inch Command Online infotainment screen that's far more cleanly integrated into the dash than it is on most other Mercedes models, and it features the usual sophisticated graphics that make those of every other rival system look dull and cheap. Particularly nice are the vehicle sections that allow you to tailor your preferred driving modes via the AMG Dynamic Select system. There's all the normal infotainment stuff too, of course, with 3D mapping, live traffic information, use of Mercedes-Benz apps and in-car internet for things like Facebook and web radio. In addition, the package provides linguatronic voice control, a 10GB music register, plus access to news and weather reports. Anything the infotainment display can't tell you will be covered off by the small colour screen that nestles between the 2 deeply cowled dials offered by the instrument binnacle. Via these wheel-mounted buttons, this gives you the usual trip, navigation, radio, media, telephone, assistance and service options any ordinary Mercedes would offer, plus it adds an additional AMG segment. Now here you can monitor turbo boost and temperatures, G-forces, check on your Dynamic Select system driving settings, or activate the lap timer that you'll need when you're cremating those Michelin Pilot Supersport tyres on track day. In true supercar style, cabin stowage space is mainly notable by its absence. You can't really cram jackets and soft items in behind the seat backs in your way you can in an SL. The tiny door pockets are merely small areas framed by stretched sections of leather trim, and there's nowhere to store your sunglasses. Still, the glove box is a decent size. You get those dual cup holders I mentioned earlier. There is a small netted compartment on the side of the passenger footwell, and the storage box between the seats has SD card and twin USB ports and features an exquisitely printed AMG crest on its leather-lined lid. So we'll finish by taking a look out back. Now with this model's optional premium pack fitted, the electric tailgate becomes one of those you can open with the wave of your foot beneath the bumper. And with the hatch raised, there's a similar sort of wide, shallow boot compartment that you get in a rival Jaguar F-Type SVR. The space provided, though, is significantly less, 350 litres or 285 litres if you close this retractable load cover to keep your belongings out of sight. Still, that's more than you get in an Audi R8, and it's enough to take 2 golf bags lengthways or crossways. It's also almost twice as much as was offered by the old SLS, despite this model's considerably shorter overall length. There's a high lip over which you have to lift heavy items, which is forgivable, and no option of a luggage net to keep smaller boot items from rolling around, which really isn't. Still, at least heavier items won't be thrown into the passenger compartment under heavy braking, thanks to this prominent aluminium strut. That's another cabin feature that can be evocatively trimmed in carbon fibre. In a world of spiralling costs, it's rather pleasing to find that Mercedes supercars are getting progressively more affordable over the decades. The brand's first modern era model of this sort, the SLR, entered the market back in 2004, priced at £313,000. Perhaps it wasn't surprising that sales weren't very brisk. Then we had the SLS-AMG, launched in 2009 and on sale throughout its lifetime for around £170,000. And now we've this Mercedes-AMG GT, priced at around the £100,000 mark. Yes, we know it is around 100 bhp down on the SLS and around 150 bhp down on the SLR, but in every meaningful way, it's just as quick as either of those two cars. Actually, in fact, the much lighter weight makes it probably a little faster in the real world. Now, we're not going to go further into that here, but we are going to look in detail at the price and specifications side of the Mercedes-AMG GT model lineup. All variants use basically the same 4-litre bi-turbo V8, but offer it in varying states of tune. 476 bhp in base GT guise, 510 bhp in this GTS model, and 557 bhp in the GTC variant. Buyers get a choice of either this coupe body style or a pretty open-topped fabric-roofed roadster version. The majority of sales are of either this GTS coupe or the base GT roadster. And if with a few well-chosen extras fitted, you think in terms of a £115,000 budget buying you either model, then you won't be too far out. Those who want something even faster and really rare have the further option of a flagship GTR variant, only available in coupe form and offering 585 bhp. This is probably the closest road-going equivalent to the car you see leading the field round in F1 races. So lottery winners form an orderly queue. So that's what you'll need to spend to become an AMG GT owner. But what else is out there to tempt you? Well, before we look at what other manufacturers are offering in this segment, we should point out that the Mercedes-AMG brand itself offers what might be seen as a direct alternative to the GTS version of this car in the form of its SL63 model. And with that car, you get much more power than mainstream AMG GT models can offer, 585 bhp. But all this does is compensate for the 200 kilo weight penalty that the SL carries about, thanks to its metal folding roof. Ultimately, the SL isn't an out-and-out driver's machine, and it isn't a really direct Porsche 911 rival in the way that this car is. So, having mentioned this Mercedes model's arch rival, let's put it up against an AMG GT in value terms. The base 476 bhp version of this car would probably be seen as a rival for a 911 Carrera S, which would cost around £13,000 less. The comparison can't be a really direct one though, because the Porsche fronts up with 56 bhp and 100 Nm less power, which is why it's half a second slower to 62 miles an hour. And it's the same story in reverse if you try and compare this 510 bhp Mercedes-AMG GTS against the kind of 540 bhp 911 Turbo that would cost around £16,000 more. Essentially, the summary here is that Mercedes has rather cleverly plugged the rather large gap in the 911 lineup between the merely very fast 911 Carrera models and the frantically quick 911 Turbo models. Stuttgart needs to take note of that. So, if Porsche can't directly take on this car, who else can? Well, the answer is that there's nothing else quite the same. For around £100,000, BMW will offer you either the hybrid i8, which isn't quite fast enough, or the M6 Coupe, which isn't quite exclusive enough. Maserati and Aston Martin can certainly supply exclusivity with 4.7-litre V8 Gran Turismo and V8 Vantage models that will save you a few thousand on a base AMG GT, but in both cases, extra weight blunts performance and delivers handling that isn't really suited to a track. What else? A Jaguar F-Type SVR. Well, one of those justifies a £4,000 premium over the GTS version of this Mercedes by delivering 65 bhp more power and mating it with standard four-wheel drive. But do you really want to spend £115,000 on a car that others will mistake for a coupe costing less than half that? No, thought not. To be frank, a better choice, we think, lies in saving around £20,000 over the base version of this Mercedes and getting yourself a 570 bhp Nissan GT-R. But again, where's the exclusivity in that? Now, your next-door neighbours would certainly pigeonhole you in the lottery winner set if you were to choose Audi's 540 bhp R8. But one of those costs around £8,000 more than this GTS and is far less practical to own. Mind you, an R8 is relatively affordable when pitched alongside the other choices you can make in this segment. Compared to this AMG GTS variant, a 540 bhp McLaren 540C costs around £15,000 more. A 500 bhp Honda NSX costs around £27,000 more. Beyond that, of course, you're into the exotic realms of Ferrari and Lamborghini. And after this very pleasant bout of decision-making, we'd completely understand if you decided that a Mercedes-AMG GT was an appropriate reward for a lifetime of hard-working endeavour. And with that choice made, you'll probably now be selecting between the 476 bhp GT version of this car and this 510 bhp GTS variant. So is it worth stretching to this pricier derivative? Well, we think so, yes. Yes, you could add the S version's standard AMG ride control adaptive damping sport suspension setup to the base model as an optional extra. But then you still have to do without three dynamic features that are exclusive to this S derivative. A faster acting electronic version of the AMG rear axle differential lock, a more powerful AMG braking system, and an extra race setting in the AMG Dynamic Select driving mode setup that delivers responses that are more suitable for track driving. Aesthetic differentiations with this S include a front grille with chrome-tipped pins and Dynamica microfiber inserts in the AMG Performance steering wheel. Plus, whereas with the base GT model you get 19-inch AMG alloy wheels all round with silver brake calipers, on this S version, Mercedes-AMG fits larger 20-inch rims at the back and uses red calipers. Both models, of course, are very well equipped. Whichever one you choose, you can expect to find LED high-performance headlamps and heated sports seats trimmed with Napa leather and featuring electric adjustment and memory settings. Plus, there's thermotronic climate control and electrically extending rear aerofoil, an anti-theft protection package, and an AMG performance exhaust that can be made louder by opening flaps inside the system at the touch of a button on the centre console. You also get an 8.4-inch centre dash screen via which you operate the standard command online system, which includes a DAB radio, a CD and DVD player, satellite navigation with 3D mapping, and live traffic information too. The system will access various Mercedes apps. It has connections for USB sticks and SD cards, and it includes integrated Wi-Fi with links to Facebook, Google Maps, and weather updates. Other features include Linguatronic voice control, a 10GB music register, and the Mercedes Me Connect system that contacts the emergency services in the event of a breakdown or an accident and uses remote line technology to offer vehicle monitoring, door locking, and the ability to interrogate the car's status. If you'd rather have the convertible roadster model, you'll find the GT variant finished to the same specification as its coupe sister, while the GTC has pretty much the same equipment level as this fixed-roof GTS variant. The top GTR coupe has its own unique trim level that includes a front grille with vertical slats, a fixed rear wing and a carbon fibre finish for the side skirts and the roof panel. 20-inch forged alloy wheels help save weight, as does the titanium exhaust silencer. A look in the GTR's cabin and you'll spot AMG bucket sport seats covered in Napa leather, and whichever model you end up choosing, it'll come with a complimentary AMG Driving Academy training session at the Mercedes-Benz World Centre at Brooklands. We'll assume here that you're focusing your attention on the mainstream GT lineup and that you've reached the point where you're ready to consider a few optional features to add a finishing touch to this very exclusive car. Now, if that's the case, then the first thing your salesperson will suggest is you look at the premium equipment line package that's been fitted here. Now, as part of this, you get a panoramic sunroof, 10-speaker Burmester surround sound system, Parktronic parking sensors with a reversing camera, power folding mirrors, an auto-dimming rear view mirror, and a keyless go, keyless entry system that allows you to raise the boot lid by waving your foot beneath the bumper. AMG door sill panels in brushed stainless steel also come included in that package, although we'd want to pay the fraction extra that Mercedes asked to get those finished in carbon fibre. There are three other key extras we think you'll want to consider if you're going to be using this car for occasional circuit use. And the most important one is the AMG Dynamic Plus pack that provides dynamic engine and transmission mounts, firmer, specially tuned suspension, a steering wheel that's fully trimmed with dynamic and microfiber, and yellow highlights on the instrument cluster. Tick the box for this package and you can also specify special sports tyres that'll give you more grip on track days. And on such events, you'll enjoy fade-free stopping power if you pay the enormous premium that Mercedes asks for the larger diameter AMG ceramic composite brakes. Right, with that sorted, on to aesthetics. Now, as a potential buyer, you can pass a few very pleasant hours on the Mercedes-Benz configurator, deciding between different alloy wheel options, maybe these cross-spoke grey-black rims, for instance. There's also a range of different and very exclusive paint colours, none more so than this AMG Solar Beam yellow finish that adds over £10,000 to the price of the car. This particular model also features the optional AMG Night package. It uses a piano black finish over the front apron, the bonnet grills, the door mirror caps, the exhaust tips and the rear diffuser. Alternatively, the silver chrome version of that pack covers all those items in a highly polished finish. Or you could go for the AMG carbon fibre option that covers these items with a distinctive composite weave pattern. If you want a wilder, racier look, the AMG Aerodynamics pack brings a larger front splitter and fixed rear wing, along with black painted side skirts and front winglets. Inside, there's just as much scope to spend more money in search of an ever more exclusive feel. I mentioned full dynamic and microfiber trimming from the AMG Performance steering wheel earlier. Well, since we'd want that, we were pleased to find that you can have it as a standalone option. This car has an optional AMG matte black carbon fibre trim package that, for the price of your mother's Fiesta, will finish various areas around the fascia and the doors in either high gloss black or matte black carbon fibre. Further optional embellishments in this particular model run to special AMG Performance seats that offer extra lateral support, and they're finished with optional red belts. In this case, extra has been paid to upholster these chairs with more exclusive Napa leather and red-stitched Dynamica microfiber. Or you can simply choose from different leather shades for the standard sports seats. You can get them decked out with contrast stitching or have them delivered in a style quilted finish. Enough, you've got the idea. This car is highly personalisable. Now, let's move on to safety. Every GT has a 3-stage ESP stability program, acceleration skid control and adaptive brake lights that flash under heavy stopping. Those emergency stops are further aided by adaptive brake assist sensors that predict the situation in advance. There's also a system that primes and dries the brakes in the wet for instant response, plus hill start assist that stops you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Driver and passenger front, side and knee airbags are fitted, along with automatic child seat recognition. A tyre pressure monitoring system is standard, and so is attention assist that recognises if the driver is showing signs of getting tired. Collision Prevention Assist Plus warns of hazards ahead and performs an emergency stop if there's no reaction from the driver. More safety kit can be added with the optional lane tracking package. It includes two features: blind spot assist that stops you from dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot, and lane keeping assist, which sends vibrating pulses through the steering wheel if you wander out of your lane at cruising speeds. Want to go further? Well, then ask about the driving assistance package that, as well as those two features, also includes two extra things. Distronic Plus will warn you if you're getting too close to the vehicle in front, and the pre-safe system senses when an accident's inevitable, and if so, it instantly closes the windows and moves the seats to an optimum position of crash protection. You'd expect this Mercedes-AMG GT to be more efficient than the old SLS. It's around 100 kilos lighter, with an engine 2.2 litres smaller and a power output that's up to 91 bhp down on its Gullwing predecessor. Nevertheless, you might still be surprised by just how much the engineers from Affalterbach have achieved here, given that they were tasked with creating a supercar that would be just as quick as the one it replaced. Some stats will help illustrate the point. The kind of returns the old SLS delivered, a thirsty 21.4 miles per gallon and a sooty 308 grams per kilometre of CO2, remain better than those you'd get from a Maserati Gran Turismo of today. And these kind of figures remain close to the sort of readings you'd also still find with some of today's Ferraris, Lamborghinis and Aston Martins. Even the supposedly more efficient power plants you get in the latest McLarens or Audi R8s still put out CO2 figures in the 260 to 270 grams per kilometre bracket, and they can't crack 25 miles per gallon on the combined cycle. It's possible to share Mercedes-AMG's quiet satisfaction then in readings that see the standard version of this GT delivering figures that really aren't very much different from those of the C63 saloon model that shares the same 4-litre V8 biturbo engine. The 476 bhp entry-level GT manages 30.4 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 216 grams per kilometre of CO2, with this 510 bhp GTS variant only fractionally behind on 30.1 miles per gallon and 219 grams per kilometre. The only contender in the segment with comparable power that can get anywhere close to these kind of stats is Porsche's 911, a car that really isn't very far ahead despite its much smaller, lighter 3-litre 6-cylinder engine. So, how have those Affalterbach engineers done it? Well, there are certainly lots of little detailed touches that help. The active louvres in the front panel, for instance. When the car's working hard, these vents open to feed cool air to the radiators, but when you're driving normally, they close to aid aerodynamics and save fuel. Inevitably, though, the biggest contributor to efficiency lies in the clever design of the M177 series power plant, developed as part of Mercedes' Blue Direct engine family. The neat element here lies in the fact that the twin turbos have been moved from their usual positions on the outside of the cylinder banks and placed instead within the cylinder V. Now, that means this Euro 6 engine can be smaller, slighter, more responsive and cleaner. More efficient electromechanical steering and an engine stop-start system help too. Of course, as a driver, you'll need to do your part here. The quoted figures assume that the AMG SpeedShift DCT transmission is operating in its most relaxed, controlled efficiency mode that gives you softer gear changes and a more restrained engine note. At cruising speeds in this setting, a gliding function will also be activated that temporarily decouples the engine from the drivetrain when you lift off the throttle. All of which is all very well, but let's get real here. In reality, if you're a typical owner, you won't be driving your AMG GT in a way that will deliver figures remotely close to the ones that Mercedes quotes. In our time with this car in mixed motoring, we've found ourselves averaging about 20 miles per gallon, a more typical figure that would probably give you a range of around 300 miles from the 75-litre fuel tank. Take this car on a track and you could expect to see consumption fall as low as 10 miles per gallon. In other words, however you slice and dice it, a supercar is always going to be a pricey thing to run. Nor is it only a question of accepting the fact that you'll be quickly on first name terms with your local filling station's cashier. Your insurance premiums will also be frightening, courtesy of a top-of-the-shop Group 50 rating for all models. Still, that would be the same whatever choice you make in this segment. And at least this Mercedes will hold its value relatively well. Expect up to around 59% of the original purchase price back after the usual 3-year ownership period. Now that is better even than a Porsche 911 can achieve, and that model is traditionally a segment leader in this respect. This makes the GT a better bet if you're looking at leasing it. Now then, what about other financial considerations? Well, you'll need to book a service every 12,500 miles, which is more frequent than Porsche 911's 20,000 mile stops. But this AMG comes with a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty and a Mercedes 30-year roadside assistance breakdown cover package. And it's worth knowing that your maintenance outlay can be kept a little in check by going for the optional service care package. This spreads the cost of regular garage visits, guaranteeing the price of parts and labour for up to 4 services, and covering the cost of all recommended service items such as brake fluid, spark plugs, air filters, fuel filters and screen wash. There's also an assist dashboard service indicator that monitors engine use and tells you exactly when a dealership visit is due. The second car, designed and built by Mercedes-AMG division, is very different from the first, and not only because it lacks the predecessor's Gullwing doors. The old SLS could be both a supercar and a continental cruiser, but with this AMG GT you sense from the beginning a refining of priorities. It's raucous, raw and uncompromising in its driver focus. As one writer put it, it's Merc's Mustang. You'll either like that or you won't. If you don't, your Mercedes salesperson will walk you gently over to the other side of the showroom where you can take a seat in the brand's more laid-back SL Roadster, the Benz that's freed up this car to be the road racer it is. The SL's a very nice machine, but it can't provide the memorable, white-knuckle, thrilling experience that it's possible to enjoy in a GT. That kind of thing is harder to find in the supercar sector than you might think. And the segment's full of very fast, very capable contenders. But it's telling that after a week of hard-charging driving in this one, I'm struggling to remember any of them. A GT gets your attention, both at the wheel and long after you've left it cooling in the driveway. That won't be for everyone. If you want a good all-rounder in this class, this isn't it. The ride is over firm, it's not as practical as it could be, and any perceived price advantage over obvious rivals disappears once you start to spec the car up in the way most owners will want. Even so, we don't care. This is one of those rare things, a truly exciting machine that you could also just about use as everyday transport without too many compromises. It's a kind of car that enthusiasts will still be talking about a century from now. There isn't anything more that needs to be said.